I'll never forget the way his hands trembled when he handed me that $20,000 tip. Vernon Caldridge, 84 years old, sitting in the back seat of my beat-up Honda Civic that still smelled like the failure of my landscaping business. The October rain was hammering the windows so hard I could barely hear him speak, but his words cut through everything like they were meant just for my soul. "You remind me of someone I lost," he whispered, pressing his business card into my palm with those shaking fingers. His eyes were wet with tears he was fighting not to shed, and something about that moment felt bigger than both of us, like the universe had conspired to put us in that exact spot at that exact second. 12 hours later, he was dead. I found out from his lawyer calling me at 6 in the morning, and suddenly I was sitting in a downtown office made of marble and leather, learning that this stranger had left me $89 million. My hands went numb when they said the number. My brain couldn't process it. I kept thinking they had the wrong person, that any second someone would walk in and explain the mistake. But when his lawyer, Atticus Brenfield, told me why Vernon chose me, when he read that handwritten letter Vernon had composed just hours before his death, I collapsed right there in that expensive leather chair. I sobbed like I hadn't since I was 5 years old, and my grandmother passed away. The security guard actually came running because they thought I was having a medical emergency. The truth Vernon discovered about my family, about a connection neither of us knew existed until his final day on Earth, changed everything. I thought I knew about fate, about failure, and about the strangers who passed through our lives. This bitter, dying old man hadn't just given me money. He'd given me back my faith in second chances, and he'd done it because he saw something in me that I'd stopped seeing in myself months ago when the banks foreclosed on everything I'd built. 6 months after watching excavators tear down the greenhouse I'd built with my father, Rupert, I was sleeping in my car behind a Walmart. The leather seats of my 2015 Honda Civic had become my bed, my office, and my prison all rolled into one. Every morning, I'd wake up to the sound of delivery trucks backing up, their beeping alarms my new alarm clock. I'd drive to the McDonald's down the street, buy a $1 coffee, and use their bathroom to shave and brush my teeth like I was getting ready for a real job instead of another day of driving strangers around Minneapolis. My landscaping business, Henley Gardens, had employed 12 people at its peak. We had contracts with 5 country clubs, 24 residential estates, and the city's botanical garden. My younger brother Deacon had run our equipment maintenance, keeping our fleet of trucks and mowers running smooth as silk. My father, Rupert, who'd started the company in 1992 with nothing but a rusty pickup and a push mower, would come by every Friday to walk through our projects, his chest puffed with pride at what we'd built together. Now, Deacon wouldn't return my calls. The last time we spoke, he'd said, "Brock, you didn't just lose a business. You lost my kids' college funds, my mortgage payments, my faith in you as a brother." The words stung worse than any bankruptcy filing ever could. My father kept leaving voicemails asking if I needed money, always careful to phrase it like he was asking for a favor. "Son, I've got too much cash sitting in savings doing nothing. Would you mind helping me out by putting some of it to use?" I was too proud to accept. Too stubborn to admit I was eating canned ravioli cold because I couldn't afford the gas station microwave fee. The Uber app became my lifeline in ways I never imagined when I first downloaded it. Every ping meant possibility. Maybe gas money to last another day. Maybe enough for a shower at the truck stop. Maybe, if I got lucky with airport runs, enough to pay for one more month at the storage unit that held what was left of my life. My father's tools, photo albums from when the business was thriving, the mahogany desk where I'd signed contracts worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. My ex-wife, Marla, had been right about one thing before she left. We were sitting in our kitchen, the one with granite countertops I'd insisted we needed to keep up appearances even as the business was failing. She'd looked at me with this mixture of love and frustration and said, "Brock, you're too stubborn to ask for help until you're already drowning. And by then, everyone around you is drowning too." She moved back to Texas after the divorce, taking our daughter Penny with her. I got supervised visits once a month when I could afford the gas to drive down there. Penny was 7, old enough to know something was wrong but young enough to believe me when I said I was just between adventures. That Tuesday morning in October, the rain was coming down in sheets. Minneapolis rain has a particular coldness to it in fall, like nature's warning that winter's coming whether you're ready or not. My windshield wipers needed replacing, streaking water across my view in a way that made every drive feel like looking at the world through tears. I'd been up since 4 a.m., caught 3 rides already, made $43 after gas. The math in my head was constant and cruel. $43 meant one more day in the storage unit, but it also meant no dinner tonight. When the ride request popped up, I almost declined it. Airport pickup, Terminal B, heading to downtown. 45 minutes each way if traffic cooperated, which it never did in the rain. My gas tank was hovering just above empty, that orange light mocking me like it knew I'd been putting in exactly 3 gallons at a time for weeks. I'd already calculated that I needed exactly 3 more rides to make rent on the storage unit, 4 if I wanted to eat, something besides peanut butter sandwiches. One more day, I muttered, accepting the ride. It had become my mantra, my prayer, my promise to nobody in particular. Just survive one more day. I drove toward the airport through streets I'd once serviced, past the Riverside Country Club where I'd installed a Japanese meditation garden just 18 months ago. The cherry trees I'd planted were probably still blooming, tended by whatever company had swooped in to claim my contracts when word got out that Henley Gardens was going under. Success to failure in this city happened fast, but failure to forgotten happened even faster. I had no idea that in exactly 53 minutes, a dying stranger would hand me a check that would change everything, or that his story would be wound through mine in ways that would make me question everything I thought I knew about chance, family, and the weight of unspoken forgiveness. Vernon Caldridge stood at Terminal B, looking like money itself. Not the flashy kind of wealth that screams for attention, but the quiet kind that whispers in cashmere coats and handmade Italian leather shoes worth more than my car. His silver hair was perfectly styled despite the wind whipping through the pickup zone, and he carried himself with the straight-backed posture of someone who'd never had to apologize for taking up space in the world. But his eyes told a different story. They were hollow, lost, the kind of eyes I'd seen in my own mirror every morning for the past 6 months. When I popped the trunk to load his single suitcase, a vintage leather piece with brass corners, he touched my shoulder gently. "Thank you for coming in this weather. I know the drive must have been difficult." During the first 10 minutes of our drive, he asked about my life with genuine interest that caught me off guard. Most passengers either ignored me completely or made polite small talk about the weather. Vernon asked real questions, the kind that required real answers. "What brought you to driving?" he asked, his voice carrying a soft Minnesota accent that money and years away hadn't quite erased. "Business went under," I said, trying to keep it simple. "Landscaping company, bad contracts, worse timing." "Family business?" Something in his tone made me answer honestly. "Was supposed to be. My father, Rupert, started it in 1992, built it from nothing into something special. I took over 5 years ago, thought I could make it even bigger. Expanded too fast, borrowed too much, trusted the wrong people." Vernon went quiet for a long moment, staring out at the rain-soaked highway. Then he said, "My son wanted to expand the family business too, pharmaceutical distribution. We'd built a solid regional operation, but he wanted to go national. I told him to wait, to be patient, that the market wasn't right. We argued terribly." His voice cracked on that last word, and I glanced in the rearview mirror to see him pressing his fingers against his eyes. "That was 37 years ago," he continued. "October 15th, 1987. I remember because it was the day before his 22nd birthday. I'd bought him a watch, a Rolex, had it engraved with 'Patience builds empires.' He threw it across my office, said I was suffocating him, that I'd never trust him to be anything more than my shadow. The pain in his voice was so raw, it felt like it had happened yesterday, not decades ago. At a red light on Hennepin Avenue, he pulled out his phone with trembling fingers, swiping through it until he found what he was looking for. "My son, Brock," he said, showing me a faded photo. "He'd be about your age now." My stomach dropped like I'd just driven off a cliff. The young man in the photo could have been my cousin, my brother, me on a different timeline. Same brown eyes with gold flecks, same stubborn jaw, same rough hands that looked like they knew real work despite the expensive clothes. "His name was Brock," I managed to say. "Brock Timothy Coldridge. Died in a motorcycle accident 3 weeks after our fight. He'd been drinking, angry, trying to prove something to someone who would never get the chance to see it." Vernon studied my face in the mirror with an intensity that made me grip the steering wheel tighter. "You have the same eyes. Brown, with those little gold flecks that caught the light when he was excited about something." The conversation turned intense without either of us meaning for it to. Vernon asked about my father, about our relationship, about whether we'd reconciled after the business failed. I found myself telling this stranger things I hadn't even admitted to myself. How I'd failed the family legacy. How my brother Deacon blamed me for losing his job and his stability. How my father still defended me to everyone at church and the hardware store despite my spectacular failure. "He sounds like a good man," Vernon said softly. "The best," I agreed, which makes disappointing him even worse. "Pull over," Vernon said suddenly as we neared downtown, his voice urgent but not demanding. "Please, just for a moment. I need to catch my breath." I found a Walgreens parking lot, pulled into a spot away from the other cars. The rain drummed on the roof like impatient fingers. Vernon was breathing hard, not from physical exertion but from the weight of whatever he was carrying. "I flew here to visit his grave," he said finally. "First time since the funeral. I've been carrying around a letter to him for 30 years, rewriting it every birthday, every anniversary of his death, never brave enough to read it at his headstone. 37 years of airports and hotels and conference rooms, and I couldn't drive 20 minutes to Lakewood Cemetery." "Why now?" I asked, turning in my seat to face Vernon properly. The rain had intensified, creating a curtain around us that made the car feel like a confessional. "Doctor gave me 3 weeks," Vernon said matter-of-factly like he was discussing a business deadline. "Pancreatic cancer, stage 4. Apparently it's been growing for months while I was busy reviewing quarterly reports and acquisition proposals. Funny how your body can be dying while your mind is still planning for next year's expansion." The words hit me like a physical blow. This man, this stranger who'd just shared his deepest regret with me, was counting his remaining days in hours. "I have no one left, Brock," he continued, and hearing him say my name, the same name as his dead son, sent chills down my spine. "My wife Eleanor died 10 years ago. Heart attack in her sleep. No other children, just lawyers and employees, and a fortune that feels like a monument to my loneliness. Do you know what it's like to have everything, and no one to leave it to? No one who'll remember you for anything other than your signature on their paychecks?" He pulled out his checkbook from his coat pocket, a leather-bound thing that looked older than me. His hands shook as he clicked open a gold pen. "Let me pay you for your time," he said. "The app handles payment, Mr. Coldridge. You don't need to. This is different." His pen moved across the check with surprising steadiness. "This isn't about the ride. This is about the conversation. This is about you listening to an old man's regrets without judgment, without trying to make me feel better with empty platitudes." He tore the check out carefully, folded it once, twice, then handed it to me. "Promise me you won't look at it until you get home. Promise me that tonight, before you go to sleep and wherever you're sleeping, you'll call your father. Tell him you love him. Tell him you're sorry. Tell him anything except nothing." His eyes were fierce now, urgent. I would give everything I have, every dollar, every property, every investment, for one more fight with my son about expansion plans. Just one more chance to say, "You were right, Brock. I should have trusted you. I should have seen that your impatience came from passion, not disrespect." Then he handed me his business card, expensive cardstock with raised lettering. "If you ever need anything, I mean that, not money, not a loan, but if you need someone to talk to who understands what it means to fail at the only thing that matters." I drove him the rest of the way to the Graves Hotel downtown, neither of us speaking, but the silence felt full, not empty. When we arrived, I insisted on helping him with his bag despite the bellhop rushing forward. At the grand entrance, under the Art Deco awning that had sheltered Minneapolis's elite for 100 years, Vernon gripped my hand with both of his. "You know what the cruelest irony is?" he said, raindrops catching on his eyelashes. "I spent 37 years building an empire worth hundreds of millions, and I'd trade every penny for one more argument with my son about expansion plans. For one more chance to see him storm out of my office, knowing he'd storm back in the next day with new spreadsheets and fresh determination." He squeezed my hand harder. "Your father is alive, Brock. He's breathing, he's waiting, he's hoping. Don't make him wait 37 years for a ghost to visit." After he disappeared into the hotel, I sat in my car for 20 minutes, engine off, just holding the folded check and his business card. Finally, I drove back to my usual spot behind the Walmart, waited until the parking lot was quiet, and unfolded the check. $20,000. The amount was written in Vernon's shaky handwriting, but the signature was bold, decisive. $20,000 from a stranger who saw his dead son in my eyes. I called my father at 10 p.m. knowing he'd be awake, probably in his workshop, tinkering with something to avoid thinking about his failed son. When he answered, I couldn't speak for 10 seconds. "Brock," he said, concern flooding his voice. "Son, are you okay?" "Dad," I managed, and then everything poured out. Vernon, the photo of his son, the check, the weight of generational disappointment, the fear that I'd ruined everything our family had built. I sobbed into the phone like a child, sitting in my car in a Walmart parking lot, rain still hammering the roof. "I'm coming," my father said simply. "Where are you?" He drove 2 hours through the storm from St. Cloud, found me in that parking lot, and held me while I cried about my failures, about Vernon's ghost son, about the stranger who'd given me money I didn't deserve and a mission I didn't know how to complete. The next morning, my phone rang at 6 a.m., yanking me from the deepest sleep I'd had in months. I'd spent the night at my father's house in St. Cloud, in my childhood bedroom, with the same baseball trophies on the shelf and faded posters on the walls. The caller ID showed an unknown Minneapolis number. "Mr. Henley? This is Atticus Brenfield from Brenfield & Associates. I'm Mr. Vernon Caldridge's attorney. I'm afraid I have difficult news. Mr. Caldridge passed away last night." My hands went numb. The phone nearly slipped from my grip. "Last night?" But I just dropped him off at the Graves Hotel yesterday afternoon. He went peacefully in his sleep. The hotel staff found him this morning when he didn't respond to his scheduled wake-up call. "Mr. Henley, I need you to come to my office this morning. Mr. Caldridge made significant changes to his will yesterday evening, and they concern you directly." The drive to Minneapolis felt surreal. My father insisted on coming with me, sitting quietly in the passenger seat of my Civic, occasionally reaching over to squeeze my shoulder. The $20,000 check was still in my wallet, uncashed, feeling heavier than paper should. Brenfield & Associates occupied the top floor of the IDS tower, all marble and mahogany, the kind of place that made you whisper involuntarily. Atticus Brenfield looked like he'd been more than Vernon's lawyer. His eyes were red-rimmed, his usually perfect suit slightly rumpled. He looked like he'd lost a friend, not just a client. "Mr. Caldridge called me at 8 p.m. last night," Atticus began. gesturing for us to sit in leather chairs that probably cost more than my failed business's monthly payroll. He was quite insistent about changing his will immediately. I tried to suggest we wait until morning, but he said, and I quote, "I've waited 37 years too long already. Not one more night." Atticus opened a manila folder with documents covered in legal language and Vernon's signature at the bottom of each page. "Mr. Henley, Vernon Caldridge has left you his entire estate. $89 million in liquid assets, properties in 7 states, and controlling interest in Caldridge Pharmaceutical Distribution." The room spun. My father grabbed my arm to steady me. "That's impossible," I said. "He didn't even know me. We met yesterday, one conversation, one ride from the airport." "He knew more than you might think," Atticus said, pulling out a handwritten letter on Vernon's personal stationery. "He left this for you. He insisted I read it to you personally, not just hand it over." Atticus cleared his throat and began reading in Vernon's words. "Brock, I know you'll try to refuse this, so I'm going to tell you something that will change your mind. After my son died, my wife Eleanor and I hired a private investigator. We wanted to know about his last weeks, the things he didn't tell us, the life he was living outside our arguments about business. We learned he'd been secretly dating a girl named Jennifer Henley. She was 19, worked at a flower shop near the university. She was pregnant when he died. My whole body went cold. Jennifer Henley was my father's younger sister. She'd died when I was 10, but I remembered the stories whispered at family gatherings, how she'd had a baby at 19, gave him up for adoption, never told anyone who the father was. My father's hand tightened on my shoulder. Atticus continued reading. Jennifer disappeared after Brock's death. We searched for years but could never find her. She'd moved, changed her phone, vanished completely. Eleanor never forgave herself for not trying harder. We could have helped her, supported her, been part of the child's life. Instead, our pride and grief made us hesitate, and we lost our only connection to our son. Yesterday afternoon, after I left you, I had my investigators run one more search with modern technology we didn't have in the 80s. They found Jennifer's records. She died in 2005, but before that, she'd given birth to a son on June 15, 1988. She gave him up for adoption to a family in Portland. The boy's name is Sean Matherson now. He's 36, married, has 3 children of his own. My father stood up abruptly, pacing to the window. "Jenny never told us," he whispered. "She never said who the father was, just that he was gone." Atticus kept reading. "Your cousin, the one your Aunt Jennifer gave up, that was my grandson. He looks exactly like my Brock did. Same eyes, same stubborn jaw, same hands that know work. I confirmed all of this yesterday afternoon. But here's what convinced me to change my will. You could have taken advantage of an old, dying man yesterday. I was vulnerable, emotional, clearly wealthy. Instead, you listened, you let me grieve. You reminded me that stubborn sons trying to prove themselves to their fathers deserve forgiveness, not abandonment. You are family, Brock, in the way that matters most. You're the man my son would have been, someone who fails, who falls, but who still has enough heart to comfort a stranger in a parking lot while your own world is crumbling." I met Sean Matherson 3 weeks later at a coffee shop in Portland. He had Vernon's eyes and my Aunt Jennifer's smile, the one I remembered from faded Christmas photos where she always stood slightly apart from everyone else, holding a secret that must have been eating her alive. Sean brought pictures of his kids, and looking at them was like seeing Vernon's features filtered through generations, softened but still recognizable. "I always wondered why my birth mother gave me up," Sean said, stirring his coffee slowly. "My adoptive parents were wonderful, gave me everything, but there was always this hole, this question mark. Now I know she was protecting me from a grief that wasn't mine to carry." We stood together at Vernon's funeral the following week. The church was packed with employees, business associates, and politicians, but Sean and I were the only family. two strangers bound by a ghost's DNA and an old man's final wish for redemption. During the eulogy, I spoke about the 40-minute car ride that changed my life, about how Vernon had given me more than money. He'd given me permission to fail without becoming a failure. With the inheritance, I didn't just restart Henley Gardens. That would have been too simple, too small for what Vernon's gift really meant. Instead, I created the Coldridge Foundation, offering second chances to failed small business owners. Not handouts, but hands up. We provide bridge funding, mentor support, and most importantly, someone who understands that bankruptcy isn't a moral failing, but sometimes just bad timing meeting worse circumstances. My brother Deacon runs the foundation now. When I first approached him with the idea, he stood in his apartment doorway for a full minute without speaking. Then he said, "You're really going to use $89 million to help people who screwed up like we did?" When I nodded, he hugged me for the first time since our business collapsed. We've helped 400 families keep their dreams alive in the 2 years since Vernon died. A bakery in North Minneapolis that got hit with unexpected health code renovations. A roofing company in Duluth whose owner got cancer and fell behind on equipment loans. A flower shop in Bloomington, which felt poetically appropriate, run by a single mother who reminded me of what Aunt Jennifer might have been if she'd had support instead of shame. My father, Rupert, and I have dinner every Sunday now. He planted a memorial garden for Vernon behind his house, where the roses grow wild and stubborn, refusing to be contained by borders or conventional pruning wisdom. Sometimes Sean brings his kids there. They run through the paths, laughing, picking flowers without asking, never knowing they're playing in a monument to forgiveness that took 37 years to build. Vernon's lawyer gave me one last message a month after the funeral. It was a note Vernon had written the morning he met me, before our ride, probably while waiting at the airport. If you're reading this, it means I finally found the courage to let go. Don't let money be your monument, Brock. Let it be the tool that builds bridges back to the people you love. Every failed business is just a successful family waiting to remember what matters. I keep Vernon's business card in my wallet next to a photo of my father and me at our original greenhouse before the excavators tore it down. On the back of the card, Vernon had written something I didn't notice until weeks later, in handwriting that was steady, written before the cancer made his hands shake. Every ending is just a beginning, waiting for brave enough hands to build it. Last week, a woman got into my Uber because, yes, I still drive once a week. Thursday mornings, early shift, airport runs mostly. It keeps me grounded, reminds me where I came from, and how quickly life can change in the backseat of a Honda Civic. She was crying, talking about her failed restaurant, how she'd disappointed her immigrant parents who'd saved for decades to help her open it. I listened. At the end of the ride, I handed her a business card for the Coldridge Foundation. "Someone once told me," I said, "that stubborn people trying to prove themselves deserve second chances." She looked at the card, then at me. "Why would you help a stranger?" I thought about Vernon, about that rainy October morning, about how a dying man's grief became my salvation. Because 37 years is too long to wait for forgiveness, and sometimes strangers are just family we haven't recognized yet. The greenhouse my father and I are building now, with Deacon, with Sean, with Vernon's money but our hands, stands on the same land where our original business began. We planted an oak tree in the center, with a plaque that reads, "For Vernon and Brock Coldridge, who taught us that some roots run deeper than blood, and some families are built from forgiveness." If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of someone you need to call, someone you need to forgive or ask forgiveness from, please share this video. Leave a comment about your own second chances, your own unexpected families, and subscribe to this channel because every week I share stories that remind us that our failures are just intermissions, not final curtains. Remember, you're one conversation away from changing someone's life or having yours changed. Sometimes it happens in the most unexpected places, like the back seat of an Uber in the middle of a rainstorm, with a stranger who sees something in you that you've forgotten to see in yourself.